Somewhere in southern China, at this very moment, the pavement is blazing enough to melt the rubber right off your sneakers. Even after the sun goes down, the heat just keeps baking the air. But look closely at the pedestrians, and they aren't sweating or struggling the way you'd assume. Some have simple scarves wrapped around their necks. Others are standing under a refreshing mist that somehow doesn't soak their clothes. And just down the street, an entire commercial hub is getting its chill from a solitary machine buried far below the surface. This is absolutely not the standard air conditioning you are used to. China has recently endured its most intense summers ever recorded, pushing urban planners to completely reimagine how to beat the heat. Rather than viewing high temperatures as a personal issue to solve indoors, engineers are building entire metropolitan areas to fight off the warmth. A few of these methods are incredibly advanced. One involves a unique coating that chills massive high-rises without drawing a single drop of power. Another borrows a millennium-old building technique from ancient dynasties to naturally ventilate today's towering structures. Today, we are walking through 8 mind-blowing methods China uses to cool down its urban spaces, totally bypassing standard AC units. From futuristic engineering to historical genius, these strategies are literally changing how millions survive brutal heat waves. And the number one method on this list is tiny enough to slip into your pocket, yet it might just become the most vital cooling breakthrough on Earth. Number 8. The viral outdoor misting system. Chances are you've scrolled past a video of this without fully grasping what was happening. Imagine a bustling avenue in a major Chinese metropolis. Crowds are shopping, eating, and strolling, while a delicate white fog slowly descends over everything, looking like a low-hanging cloud resting on the pavement. The crazy part? The folks walking through it aren't getting drenched. No one is reaching for an umbrella. They simply look vastly more comfortable than anyone should in that kind of sweltering weather. That white fog is an open-air cooling grid, relying on one of the most basic laws of physics. It is called evaporative cooling. Here is the actual science behind it. The setup forces water through tiny nozzles, creating a spray so fine that you don't even feel actual drops. It produces a cloud of microscopic moisture. As these tiny particles drift down through the blazing air, they vanish before they can even touch the pavement. They evaporate mid-air, and evaporation is not a free process. To shift from a liquid drop to a vapor, water has to absorb energy, and it steals that energy directly from the surrounding atmosphere. Every time a microscopic drop disappears, it takes a fraction of the area's heat with it. Multiply that process by millions of droplets hovering over a packed crosswalk, and the temperature drop is dramatic. Within minutes, this kind of setup can pull the immediate air temperature down by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. And this isn't inside a closed-off room. This is happening right out on a busy public sidewalk, a place where fighting the heat normally feels totally impossible. Because the spray is incredibly fine, the moisture disappears before making contact. People stroll right through this fog and remain completely dry. You won't find any muddy puddles, slippery roads, or damp shirts. Just sweet, chilled air. But the biggest advantage is the power bill. Standard AC units rely on compressing chemical refrigerants, running heavy machinery, and battling thermodynamics constantly. This misting setup just requires a basic water pump and a water line. It consumes a tiny fraction of the electricity. Because of this, a municipality can chill an open-air market, a transit station, or a busy plaza for pennies compared to what it would cost to do the same job with traditional cooling. Assuming conventional cooling could even work outdoors, which it really can't. You will notice this exact theme popping up throughout this countdown. China keeps looking beyond the standard window unit and asking a totally different question. Instead of asking how to produce cold air, they are asking how to stop the heat from trapping itself in the first place, which perfectly sets up our next massive project. One that doesn't just chill a single road, but attempts to rewrite the weather entirely. Number 7. Hacking the sky with cloud seeding. Back in the summer of 2022, China endured the most punishing, prolonged heat wave in its modern history. It dragged on for more than 60 days, shattering temperature benchmarks that had been in place since nationwide. Tracking started in 1961. The mighty Yangtze, one of the globe's largest rivers, literally dried up in certain sections. The riverbeds cracked open. Hydroelectric dams in Sichuan, which supply power to massive urban centers hundreds of miles away, saw their energy output drop to almost nothing. Factories were ordered to halt operations. Wildfires sparked across the mountainous regions surrounding Chongqing. So, the government authorized a plan that sounds straight out of a movie. They decided to make it rain. This initiative is known as weather modification, and China operates the most extensive program of its kind in the world. The core concept relies on a specific chemical known as silver iodide. At a microscopic level, its crystal structure is incredibly similar to ice. It's so close, in fact, that if you introduce it into a cloud that already contains moisture, water vapor grabs onto the chemical and starts to freeze. Those brand new ice crystals expand, get heavy, and drop. A cloud that otherwise would have just floated past without releasing a single drop is nudged into dumping rain. How they get that silver iodide up into the cloud layer is where things get dramatic. China uses every tool it has. Rockets fired from the ground, anti-aircraft artillery blasting cigarette-sized rods straight up into the sky, piloted airplanes flying directly through the clouds, and, perhaps most impressively, drones. During that massive 2022 heat emergency, China sent up a wing-loom drone, a massive unmanned aircraft initially designed for military operations, right over the baking skies of Sichuan. In one continuous flight, lasting several hours, it burned through 20 silver iodide flares, blanketing thousands of square kilometers and coaxing rain out of a sky that had refused to cooperate for weeks. Once the seeding operations kicked in, local temperatures in parts of the province finally dropped. Ironically, some parched regions that had been desperate for water suddenly had to brace for flooding instead. Now, I want to be totally transparent with you here. Cloud seeding isn't a magical weather dial. It only functions if there is already moisture present in the clouds to begin with. And even under perfect conditions, it can only boost rainfall by a limited margin. You cannot just conjure a thunderstorm out of a clear blue sky. But what it can do is push a stubborn atmosphere past its breaking point. And a sudden downpour over a roasting city accomplishes two vital things at once. It instantly cools the air directly, and it replenishes the crucial rivers and reservoirs that the entire grid depends on. It is heat management on a sky-high level. Yet, the next strategy on this list didn't originate in a laboratory or a drone command center. It came from a design that is 1,000 years old. Number 6. The ancient secret of the sky well. Here is a question really worth pondering. If ancient builders knew exactly how to keep a home breezy and cool during a brutally humid Chinese summer using zero electricity, zero spinning fans, and absolutely no machinery of any kind, why did we completely forget how they did it? Because we did. And now, modern architects are going back to steal the exact technique. If you walk inside a historic residence in the old Huizhou region of southern and eastern China, your eyes will immediately be drawn to the core of the structure. It isn't a living room, and it's not a hallway. It is an opening. It's a high, narrow, walled-in courtyard slicing straight up through the middle of the house, totally exposed to the sky above. In Mandarin, they call this a tianjing, which translates to a sky well. At first glance, it looks purely decorative. A nice little pocket of sunlight, rain, and fresh air, sitting right in the heart of an otherwise closed-off house. But it is doing something far more brilliant than just letting the sun in. It is a completely passive cooling engine powered entirely by physics. Think about the nature of hot air. It always rises. Inside a sky well home, the rooms wrapped around the base of that tall central shaft stay heavily shaded and cool because the surrounding walls prevent direct sunlight from ever reaching the bottom of the well. The air trapped down there remains dense and chilly. Meanwhile, any warmth generated inside the house naturally floats up and escapes out the open roof, acting exactly like heat traveling up a chimney. As that hot air leaves, It creates a vacuum that pulls fresh, cooler air in through the lower rooms to replace it. The entire building transforms into a slow, silent, self-driven ventilation system. There are no moving parts and no power bills. The mere shape of the architecture handles the work, and it genuinely works. Researchers studying these historic skywell houses in southern China found that the interior spaces consistently stay significantly cooler than the scorching air outside by several degrees on a hot afternoon. There are dedicated craftsmen in China who have spent more than 30 years restoring these historic homes, officially recognized by the government as living guardians of intangible cultural heritage, ensuring this knowledge stays alive. But here is where history transitions into the future. Modern engineers figured out that you don't actually need an exposed, open courtyard to harness this principle. You just need the natural airflow. So, in Guangdong province, architects planned a 68-story skyscraper featuring hollow internal channels. These are basically giant vertical windpipes that carry natural breezes straight up through the high-rise, moving air the exact same way. A sky well ventilates a historic house. It's a 1,000-year-old idea, scaled up into a modern megatower, chilling entire floors that would normally depend completely on massive mechanical units. The ancients weren't primitive. They had already solved a problem that we simply handed over to machines and stopped thinking about. And speaking of the ground itself, this next entry highlights a massive flaw baked into almost every single metropolis on the globe, probably including the one you live in right now. Number 5. Why the streets are cooking the city. Take a look at the road beneath your feet the next time you step outside on a blazing day. That dark asphalt you are walking on is secretly one of the biggest reasons your hometown feels like a furnace, and almost nobody realizes it. Here is the issue. Standard black asphalt is one of the most heat-absorbing materials humans have ever intentionally plastered across our environments. Its reflectiveness is incredibly low, hovering around 5 to 10%, meaning the pavement is soaking up at least 90% of the solar radiation that strikes it. On a baking summer afternoon, that dark street can easily top 60 degrees C, and in certain spots, it pushes well past 70. That is hot enough to burn human skin instantly upon contact. But the street doesn't just get hot. It acts as a massive thermal battery. It absorbs heat all day long, and then, hours after sunset when you desperately want a breeze, it just keeps blasting that stored warmth right back out into the night air. It is a massive reason why urban areas stay uncomfortably hot after dark, while the surrounding countryside actually cools off. Scientists refer to this phenomenon as the urban heat island effect. Your city is literally a glowing island of heat, standing out against the cooler landscape around it. And the pavement is one of the primary radiators keeping the whole place hot. So, major cities like Guangzhou and Shenzhen decided to tackle the problem directly at the source. They began repaving their streets with what they call cool pavements. This solution generally comes in a few variations, often combined together. First, they apply solar reflective coatings. Instead of a dark black finish, the road is treated to bounce a significantly larger percentage of the sun's radiation right back into the sky before it ever has a chance to turn into trapped heat. Next, they use thermal blocking layers that actively slow down the pavement's ability to pull heat deeper into its core structure. And third, they utilize highly porous materials that retain moisture, allowing the street to shed heat through evaporation, the exact same evaporative cooling concept from the misting system at number 8, just engineered straight into the ground. And the results are tangible. Field measurements of these new coatings show road temperatures plummeting by roughly 7 to 14 degrees C when compared to standard dark asphalt baking under the exact same sun. Now, imagine taking that kind of massive temperature drop and spreading it across every major avenue in a metropolis. You aren't just chilling down a single block, you are lowering the thermostat of the entire urban heat island, and you are doing it at night, right when it matters the most for residents trying to get some sleep. Cooling down the streets is a massive step, but the next strategy cools down the buildings themselves, and it accomplishes this using nothing but a layer of paint and the cold vacuum of outer space. Number 4. The paint that cools without electricity. I told you there would be some science fiction near the beginning of this countdown, and here it is. This is the innovation that genuinely stops people in their tracks when they figure out how it functions. Because it sounds like it shouldn't be possible. A paint, literally just a paint. You roll it onto a roof, and the entire structure drops in temperature. No wiring, no electricity, no machinery at all. And it functions perfectly even while sitting under the direct, scorching sun. So, how can a totally passive coating with zero energy input actually make a surface colder than the ambient air surrounding it? The trick is that it isn't fighting the heat at all. It is literally throwing the heat away into space. This technique is known as passive radiative cooling, and it tackles two tasks simultaneously. First, the coating is specially formulated to reflect nearly all incoming sunlight, ensuring that the vast majority of the sun's energy is never absorbed by the structure to begin with. You can probably wrap your head around that part. A super bright, highly reflective white surface stays cooler. No surprise there. But the second function is where the genius lies. Every object that is warm naturally emits heat in the form of infrared radiation. Your body does it. The pavement does it. The building does it. Typically, that emitted heat only travels a tiny distance before being reabsorbed by something else nearby, so the warmth essentially goes nowhere. But there is a very specific frequency of infrared wavelengths that our atmosphere is practically invisible to. Heat that radiates at those precise frequencies does not get trapped. It rockets straight up through the atmosphere and out into the freezing void of deep space, which naturally hovers near absolute zero. This special paint is precisely calibrated to emit its trapped heat exactly within that specific frequency band. So, the painted roof is silently utilizing the entire cosmos as its personal heat sink. It is continuously dumping its warmth directly into outer space 24 hours a day without demanding a single drop of electricity to do it. And because it is shedding heat faster than the sun can bake it in, the painted surface can actually become colder than the air around it, even in broad daylight. That is the detail that completely shatters people's intuition. This isn't just some theoretical lab experiment either. A research team based in Hong Kong actually created a commercial version of this coating, and the data is stunning. When applied to a rooftop baking under direct sunlight, it has drastically lowered surface temperatures compared to a standard roof, and it actually dragged indoor temperatures down by roughly 10 degrees C. That translates into an energy savings of nearly 40% when it comes to cooling costs, simply because the AC unit inside the building barely even has to kick on. This coating has already been deployed on hundreds of structures across dozens of nations, a tower that naturally refrigerates itself by shooting heat straight into the sky forever, completely for free. That is number 4. Now, we are scaling up from cooling a single tower to chilling an entire commercial zone from one central hub. Number 3, the massive subterranean air conditioner. Imagine a sprawling financial district, dozens of high-rises, corporate offices, shopping centers, hotels, and residential blocks. Now, picture the standard method we use to keep all of that cool. Thousands upon thousands of isolated AC units, every single one strapped to the side of a building, every single one powering its own compressor, every single one slowly leaking refrigerants and sucking up its own electricity, all of them individually battling the exact same heat wave and wasting a massive amount of power in the process. China looked at that chaotic setup and asked, why? Why cool a massive urban zone with thousands of tiny, inefficient machines when you could just chill the entire thing using one gigantic one? This is called district cooling. And in the Qianhai district of Shenzhen, they are doing it on a scale that is honestly difficult to comprehend. Buried deep underground, multiple stories below the pavement, is a facility that reporters have described as looking more like an industrial factory than a cooling machine. It is a massive labyrinth of insulated pipes, heavy pumps, and industrial chillers, taking up an area big enough to fit a football stadium. This hidden plant has only one purpose. It generates freezing cold water on a massive industrial scale. It then forces that chilled water through a massive web of insulated pipes buried beneath the avenues, delivering it directly into tower after tower all across the neighborhood. Every skyscraper taps into this underground grid, exactly the same way your home taps into the city water supply. The freezing water enters the building, soaks up all the trapped heat from the interior spaces, and cycles right back to the central plant to get frozen again. The high-rises get all the chilling power they could ever need, and not a single one of them has to operate its own bulky chiller unit. The entire neighborhood relies on one single, hyper-optimized source of cold. The boost in efficiency is staggering, and this is why it is so much more than just a neat trick. A single facility like this can handle the cooling needs for nearly 3 square kilometers of commercial real estate. By centralizing all of that heavy machinery into one perfectly tuned plant, rather than relying on thousands of random scattered units, the Qianhai grid reportedly saves about 130 million kilowatt-hours of power every single year. To put that into perspective, that is the same energy you'd get from burning around 16,000 tons of coal, and it prevents roughly 130,000 tons of carbon dioxide from entering our atmosphere annually. Fewer machines also means drastically less chemical refrigerant, which is a big deal because refrigerants are some of the most potent greenhouse gases humanity creates. It completely flips the philosophy of standard air conditioning. Instead of fighting 10,000 tiny battles against the summer heat, they wage one massive, ruthlessly efficient war, hidden far below the ground where no one even notices it. That is how you handle heat on a city-wide scale. But 2 of the most impactful cooling strategies in China have nothing to do with skyscrapers or underground grids. They are entirely focused on the lone individual standing out on the sidewalk, and they are up next. Number 2. Solar-powered street chillers. Everything we've covered up to this point fixes an entire area, a road, a high-rise, a commercial zone, or even a cloud. But there is a glaring issue none of those can fix. What happens to the actual person just walking around outside, waiting on a bus, standing in the midday sun with absolutely nowhere to run? You aren't supposed to be able to air condition the great outdoors. But China started building machines that try to do it anyway. Placed throughout urban spaces at bus pavilions, subway entrances, tourist hotspots, and packed plazas, you will now see freestanding outdoor cooling towers. These are self-contained pods whose sole purpose is to blast a stream of refreshing, chilled air directly into the open spaces where crowds gather and sweat. Instead of having to run indoors to escape the heat, the relief finds you right out on the pavement. And here is the design choice that makes it incredibly smart instead of a waste of energy. Many of these pods are powered by built-in solar panels. Think about how perfect that logic is. The absolute hottest hours of the afternoon, when people need these chillers the most, are the exact same hours when the sun is beating down with peak intensity, which means the solar panels are cranking out their absolute maximum energy. The very sunlight that is making everyone miserable is the exact power source running the system that fights it. The problem and the solution peak at the exact same moment, completely in sync. It transforms the sun from a brutal enemy into the electricity grid. Imagine a bus shelter that keeps you comfortable while you wait, powered entirely by the blazing light that would otherwise make the wait torture, without pulling a single watt from the main power grid. It's a relatively small innovation compared to a massive underground cooling plant, but it impacts people exactly where they experience the day in those ordinary, frustrating moments of waiting around outside in the elements. Which brings us finally to number 1. It isn't a massive government initiative or a colossal engineering project. It's a device small enough to slide right into your pocket, and it's become so incredibly popular across China that it is quietly one of the most widely used cooling innovations on the face of the planet. Number 1. The pocket-sized personal cooler. Here is the ultimate twist. After exploring drones that manipulate clouds, coatings that project heat into the cosmos, and massive subterranean complexes chilling entire city blocks, the absolute number 1 way China is conquering the heat is also the most microscopic. It's hyper-personal. It's incredibly cheap. It is everywhere, and it might honestly be saving more lives than anything else on our list. If you take a stroll down any Chinese sidewalk in July, you'll spot them everywhere once you know what to look for. You'll see devices wrapped around people's necks that look exactly like a pair of headphones, silently pushing a breeze up across their face and skin. You'll see small handheld fans equipped with a tiny water reservoir, spraying a micro mist into the airflow for an instant punch of evaporative cold. You'll even see lightweight vests or jackets with battery-operated fans stitched right into the lining, puffing up slightly as they circulate a steady stream of fresh air all around the wearer's torso. These are wearable, personal climate control systems, and they have transitioned from a quirky novelty into a daily survival tool in China faster than anywhere else in the world. The neck collars are easily the most impressive. The premium models don't just blow air. They press a small metal plate directly against the back of your neck. Tucked behind that plate is a miniature solid-state cooling chip. When electricity flows through it, one side of that chip gets freezing cold. It gets chilly enough that the plate pulls thermal energy straight out of your flesh at the exact spot where your blood flows closest to the skin. If you chill the blood flowing through the neck, you help regulate the temperature of your entire body. Chinese tech brands have transformed these into a massive retail market, upgrading them year after year to make them incredibly lightweight, virtually silent, and highly efficient. And I want to close on why this is a much bigger deal than it sounds. It is easy to dismiss a personal fan as just a minor luxury. But in a country enduring unprecedented heat waves where a massive percentage of the population works, commutes, and conducts their daily lives out in the open air, a device that prevents your core temperature from spiking into the danger zone isn't just a tech toy. Heat stroke is incredibly serious. It can kill. A cheap, wearable cooling device that any ordinary citizen can buy, carry around, and activate the exact second the weather turns hazardous is a literal lifesaver for hundreds of millions of people, reaching them in a deeply personal way that an underground network or a treated highway never could. That is the core philosophy of this entire list, wrapped up in a single product. China didn't just focus on manufacturing larger air conditioning units. They launched an assault on heat from every conceivable angle at the exact same time. From the clouds using drones, from the streets using reflective roads, from the roofs using paint that beams energy into outer space, from deep underground using massive industrial water lines, and right down to the individual human being with a cooling collar resting on their shoulders. The traditional air conditioner cools a single room. China decided to cool the city, the road, and the actual person all simultaneously. So, those are 8 incredible methods China is utilizing to cool down entire urban centers without relying on the window units you're familiar with. And the common thread linking every single one of these breakthroughs is a powerful idea we should all take note of. Most of the globe views extreme heat as a private dilemma, something you solve one closed-off room at a time. China has begun approaching it as a form of public infrastructure, something a city constructs the same way it lays down asphalt or installs water grids. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. Which of these innovations would you love to see implemented in your own hometown? The sidewalk mist that chills you down without getting you wet? The passive paint that cools down a building completely for free? Or that neat little cooling device wrapped around your neck? Let me know down in the comments, because I read through them, and the discussion on our last video was honestly more interesting than the video itself. If this breakdown changed how you look at the road beneath your boots, or the coating on a rooftop, go ahead and do the one thing that supports this channel more than anything else. Smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss the next upload. And there is a follow-up coming very soon that connects directly to what we just talked about. Because a nation that can refrigerate its cities without relying on traditional air conditioners is a nation completely reimagining the future of energy itself. The next video dives straight into the massive power grid China is quietly constructing to run all of this. Trust me, you are going to want to see where this goes. I'll see you over there.